Hello, dear listener. Take a deep breath and prepare to go deep into the story of things you use every day and their motherland, Greece. You're with me on Custom Stories in English. Take a comfortable spot and let the story begin. Everything you use every day, democracy, philosophy, mathematics, theater, the Olympic Games, started in one place, a small country on the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. No internet, no printing press, no global communication, just people, ideas, and an obsession with understanding the world. And almost nobody knows how it actually happened. Today, we're going back. Not to the version you learned in school, not to the marble statues and heroic myths. We're going back to the real Greece. Messy, brilliant, violent, and deeply human. Because here's the thing about ancient Greece that most people miss. They weren't gods. They weren't perfect. They were people, just like us, who were trying to figure out how to live, how to govern, how to think. And in the process, they accidentally built the foundation of the entire modern world. This is their story. Part 1. Democracy. Let's start with the idea that probably shaped your life more than anything else. Democracy. You've heard the word 1,000 times. You probably think you know what it means. But the version of democracy that was born in Athens around 500 BC looked almost nothing like what we have today. Here's how it actually worked. Imagine you're a citizen of Athens. You walk into the public square, the agora, and you vote. Not by pressing a button, not by filling out a form. You pick up a broken piece of pottery, a shard from an old clay jar, and you scratch a name on it. The name of someone you want gone. That was voting. They called the pottery shards ostraca, and if enough people wrote the same name, that person was exiled, banished from the city for 10 years. No trial, no appeal, just gone. Because the majority decided they didn't like you. We still use that word today, ostracism. But here's what makes it even more complicated. This democracy, the world's first, only worked for some people. Women couldn't vote. Slaves couldn't vote. Foreigners couldn't vote. And slaves weren't a small group. In Athens, at its peak, there were more enslaved people than free citizens. We'll come back to that. For now, think about this. The system that gave us the concept of political freedom was built on the labor of people who had none. And yet, it was still revolutionary. For the first time in human history, ordinary people had a say in how they were governed. Not kings, not gods, people. One man in particular pushed this idea further than anyone before him. His name was Cleisthenes. Most people have never heard of him, but historians call him the father of democracy. In 508 BC, he restructured Athenian society, breaking the old system of noble families and giving power to ordinary citizens. He didn't do it because he was an idealist. He did it because he was losing a political battle and needed the people on his side. Democracy wasn't born from pure virtue. It was born from politics, ambition, and a man who needed votes. Sound familiar? But it worked. And once people had a taste of having a voice, they didn't want to give it up. The Athenian assembly, the Ecclesia, met on a hillside called the Pnyx. Any male citizen could speak. Any citizen could vote. On any given day, thousands of men would gather and decide the fate of their city, war or peace, taxes or not, who to punish, who to reward. It was loud, it was chaotic, it was gloriously imperfect, and it changed everything. Part 2. Philosophy. Now let's talk about three men who changed the way human beings think. Not just in Greece, not just in their time, forever. Their names were Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. 3 generations of teachers and students. And together, they built the foundation of Western philosophy. Let's start with Socrates. Here's something strange. Socrates, one of the most famous thinkers in all of human history, never wrote a single word. Not one line. Everything we know about him comes from other people's accounts, mostly from his student, Plato. So, who was he really? Imagine a short, ugly man wandering through the streets of Athens. No school, no office, no title. Just questions. He would approach strangers, politicians, poets, craftsmen, and start asking them things. Simple things. What is justice? What is courage? What is knowledge? And then he would keep asking, deeper and deeper, until the person realized they had no idea what they were talking about. He called this method elenchus, the art of cross-examination. We call it the Socratic method. It's still used in law schools today. But here's the dark side of Socrates. Athens didn't love him. The city put him on trial, charged with corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. He was found guilty. And he was given a choice, exile or death. He chose death. He drank a cup of poison, hemlock, surrounded by his friends, talking about the soul until the very end. The city that invented democracy executed its greatest philosopher. Now, his student, Plato. If Socrates asked the questions, Plato tried to answer them. He wrote dialogues, philosophical conversations that explored justice, love, knowledge, the soul, the perfect society. And his vision of the perfect society? It was deeply unsettling. In his work, The Republic, Plato described an ideal state, ruled not by the people, but by philosopher kings, wise men who would make decisions for everyone else. Citizens would be divided into classes. There would be no private property among the ruling class. Art would be strictly controlled. Lies would be told to the public for their own good. He called them noble lies. Scholars have debated for centuries. Was Plato describing a utopia or a blueprint for totalitarianism? You decide. And then Aristotle, Plato's student, and perhaps the most influential thinker who ever lived. Aristotle didn't just philosophize. He studied everything: biology, physics, politics, poetry, ethics, logic. He essentially invented the scientific method, The idea that you understand the world by observing it, not just thinking about it. He also had a very famous student of his own, a teenage boy from the kingdom of Macedon. His name was Alexander. You may have heard of him. Aristotle tutored young Alexander for 3 years. He taught him philosophy, medicine, science, and literature. He gave him a copy of Homer's Iliad that Alexander reportedly carried with him into every battle. The philosopher shaped the conqueror, and the conqueror spread Greek ideas across half the known world. 3 men, 3 generations, and they rewired the human mind. Part 3. The Olympic Games. Every 4 years, the world stops. Billions of people watch athletes from every country compete for glory. Flags wave, records fall, and somewhere in the back of our minds, we feel like we're part of something ancient and universal. We are, more than we realize. The Olympic Games began in 776 BC, in a valley in western Greece called Olympia, and they looked nothing like what we watch today. First, the athletes competed naked, completely. No uniforms, no equipment, nothing. The Greeks believed the human body was beautiful, and that competing in the nude was both honest and respectful to the gods. The word gymnasium, where athletes trained, comes from the Greek word gymnos. It means naked. Second, there were no gold medals. Winners received a wreath, a simple crown woven from branches of a wild olive tree. That's it. No prize money, no endorsement deals, no trophy. And yet, that wreath was everything. A victory at Olympia was the highest honor a Greek man could achieve. Poets wrote odes about winners. Cities built statues of them. Families passed down the story of a champion for generations. The glory of winning was so powerful that some city-states would tear down part of their own walls to welcome a champion home, because a city that produced an Olympic victor didn't need walls to protect it. Third, and this is the part that still astonishes me, every war stopped. The Greeks were constantly at war with each other, city against city, tribe against tribe. And yet, during the Olympic Games, a sacred truce was declared. The Ekacheria. All fighting stopped. Athletes and spectators could travel safely across Greece to reach Olympia. For those weeks, the gods mattered more than politics. The games weren't just sport, they were religion, a celebration of Zeus, the king of the gods. Every athlete who competed was, in some sense, making an offering. And the games continued, uninterrupted, for over 1,000 years. From 776 BC all the way to 393 AD, when a Christian Roman emperor banned them as pagan. 1,000 years of competition, and then silence, until 1896, when the modern Olympics were revived in Athens. The flame was rekindled, and the ancient world reached forward across the centuries and touched us. Part 4. Theater. Here's a question. Where were you the last time you cried at a movie? Or laughed so hard at a comedy that your stomach hurt? Or felt your heart break watching 2 characters fall apart? That experience, the experience of sitting in the dark and feeling something because of a story, that was invented in ancient Greece. All of it. Drama, tragedy, comedy. The idea that you can tell a story on a stage and make an audience feel real emotions, that was a Greek invention. And it started in the most unexpected way. It started with a drunk festival. Once a year, the Athenians held a celebration for Dionysus, the god of wine, chaos, and ecstasy. During these festivals, crowds would sing, dance, drink, and lose themselves in something bigger than everyday life. It was wild, it was loud, it was sacred. And at some point, nobody knows exactly when, someone stepped out of the crowd and started telling a story, playing a character, becoming someone else. That person is traditionally considered the world's first actor. His name was Thespis. We still use the word today, thespian, to mean an actor. From those chaotic beginnings, Greek theater evolved into something extraordinary. Playwrights competed at annual festivals. The great Athenian dramatists Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides wrote plays that explored the deepest questions of human existence: fate, free will, justice, the relationship between humans and gods. These plays were performed in massive open-air theaters carved into hillsides, some holding up to 17,000 people. The acoustics were so perfect that a whisper on stage could be heard at the very back row. Actors wore large masks, exaggerated expressions of joy or sorrow, so the audience could read emotions from far away. Men played all the roles, including women. The masks weren't just practical, they were symbolic. Behind the mask, an actor could become anyone. And here's what makes Greek theater so remarkable. The stories they told 2,500 years ago are still our stories. Oedipus, who unknowingly kills his father and marries his mother, and then tears out his own eyes when he learns the truth. Antigone, who defies the king to bury her brother, choosing family loyalty over law. Medea, who kills her own children to punish a faithless husband. These aren't ancient myths. They're human beings, trapped by fate, destroyed by pride, torn between love and duty. That's why we're still reading them.
Part 5. Science and Mathematics. Now let's talk about the people who tried to understand the universe. Greek scientists and mathematicians were extraordinary, but they were also, let's be honest, extremely strange people. Take Pythagoras. You know his theorem. Every student in the world has memorized it. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. It's on math tests, on architecture blueprints, in engineering software. It's everywhere. But Pythagoras himself was not just a mathematician. He was a cult leader. He founded a secret society, the Pythagoreans, with strict rules. Members had to follow a bizarre code of conduct. They couldn't eat beans. They couldn't touch white roosters. They had to sleep in specific positions. They believed numbers were sacred, divine, and that mathematics was the secret language of the universe. When Pythagoras discovered that some numbers couldn't be expressed as simple fractions, what we call irrational numbers, the discovery was so disturbing to his followers that, according to legend, they drowned the man who revealed it publicly. Math, so serious they killed for it. Then there's Archimedes. One day, Archimedes was trying to solve a problem. How do you measure the volume of an irregular shape, like a crown, without melting it down? He stepped into his bath, and as the water rose,
he suddenly understood. The water displaced by his body equaled his body's volume. He was so overwhelmed that he ran out into the street, naked, shouting, "Eureka!" It means, "I have found it." He had found it. And that principle, that objects displace their own volume in water, is still used in physics and engineering today. And then there's perhaps the most quietly astonishing achievement in all of ancient science: Eratosthenes. A Greek scholar living in Alexandria, Egypt, around 240 BC. He heard that in the city of Syene, roughly 800 kilometers to the south, at noon on the summer solstice, the sun shone directly down a vertical well with no shadow at all. The sun was directly overhead. But in Alexandria, on the same day at the same time, a vertical stick cast a shadow. That meant the Earth's surface was curved, and from the angle of that shadow, just about 7 degrees, Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the entire Earth. His answer was approximately 40,000 kilometers. The actual circumference of the Earth? 40,075 kilometers. He was off by less than 1%. Using a stick and a shadow. In 240 BC, no satellites, no computers, no instruments of any kind, just observation, geometry, and an extraordinary mind.
Part 6. The Dark Side. We need to talk about something uncomfortable. Everything we've covered, democracy, philosophy, the Olympics, theater, science, it all sounds magnificent, and it was. But ancient Greece was also a civilization built on systems that we would call, without hesitation, monstrous. Let's start with Sparta. Sparta was the other great city of ancient Greece, and it operated on a principle that is almost impossible to comprehend from a modern perspective. When a child was born in Sparta, it was brought before a group of elders. They examined it. If they decided the child was weak or sickly or simply not up to Spartan standards, it was taken to a ravine on Mount Apothetai and left there to die. This wasn't considered cruel. It was considered practical. Sparta needed warriors. Weakness had no place. The children who survived were raised by the state, not their families. From the age of 7, boys entered a brutal training program called the agoge. They were deliberately underfed so they would learn to steal. They were beaten, not as punishment, but as training. They slept on reeds they cut themselves. They wore one garment regardless of the season. The goal was to produce soldiers. And it worked. Spartan warriors were the most feared fighters in the ancient world. 300 of them once held off an army of hundreds of thousands at the pass of Thermopylae for 3 days. But back to Athens, the city we've been celebrating. Athens, the birthplace of democracy, the city of Socrates and Plato and the Olympics, was built on slavery. At the height of Athenian power, there were approximately 100,000 enslaved people in Attica, the region around Athens. In some estimates, slaves outnumbered free citizens. They worked in homes, in fields, in mines. The silver mines at Laurion, which funded the Athenian fleet that defeated Persia, were worked by enslaved people in conditions so brutal that few survived more than a few years. The men who gathered on the Pnyx to vote about freedom and justice, many of them owned human beings. This is the contradiction at the heart of ancient Greece, and it's important to sit with it because it's not just a Greek contradiction, it's a human one.
The same civilization that gave us the concept of human dignity denied it to thousands of people every single day.
So what do we do with all of this? Greece was not a paradise. It was not a golden age of perfect wisdom and beauty. It was a complicated, contradictory, deeply human civilization. They gave us democracy, and they excluded most people from it. They gave us philosophy, and they killed the man who practiced it most honestly. They gave us the Olympics, and they held them in honor of gods they invented. They gave us theater, and they built it from chaos and wine. They gave us science, and their scientists were sometimes cultists and madmen. They were, in every sense, people. And that is exactly why everything they created still lives. Because the questions they asked are still our questions. How should we be governed? What is justice? What is the good life? What do we owe each other? How do we understand the universe? We haven't answered these questions. We're still working on them. 2,500 years later. Every time you vote, you're standing on the Pnyx. Every time you watch a film and feel something, you're in a theater that Thespis built. Every time a scientist makes a discovery by observing the world, they're following Aristotle's method. Every time athletes gather to compete, the olive wreath is still there, invisible but real. Greece didn't give us a finished world. It gave us a way of asking questions. And that gift has never stopped giving. Thanks for being here. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to Custom Stories in English, and I'll see you in the next one.